Hallo und herzlich willkommen beim 38. DOK.fest München. Ich bin Christina Wolf und sitze hier im wunderschönen Silbersaal und freue mich sehr, dass Sie uns zuhören oder zuschauen. Und wir sprechen jetzt mit Toby Amies. Er ist der Regisseur von In the Court of the Crimson King. King Crimson at 50, ein Film, den wir in unserer Doc Music-Reihe zeigen. And I'm very, very happy to speak to you again, Toby. Hi.
Good to see you again, Christina.
So, take us through the moment when you decided, yes, I will make this film about this band.
It's more a question of spending 4 years questioning why I decided to make the film. Well, basically, Robert Fripp asked me to make the film, and I knew Robert socially at that point, and I was aware of lots of his work, or not really aware of King Crimson that much. So I just knew it was going to be. I like working with interesting people. I used to have when I was a portrait photographer, I used to hand out this card that said to people, "I'd love to come and take your picture one day," because I like to take pictures from people I will learn something from. And so that's kind of my attitude to the film, was that I was just immediately, I was like, you know what, I'm going to learn a lot by working with this artist and the artists he surrounded myself from. So the decision to say yes was almost immediate, actually. Although, you know, as I said, that I did have cause to, if not regret that decision, to question it subsequent to making.
Okay, so there are two questions. What did you learn from them, and why did you question your decision?
I learned so much from them. Let's start with the second question. Yeah. I made the decision because it was really hard work, and you know, I think if you're making a documentary, if you're making a good, meaningful work of documentary cinema, then, and it's about people, then you're asking them to put their humanity on the screen. And the more of your humanity you get from them, I think the more powerful the documentary can be. And as a result, you're asking a lot of people. And people aren't always, even if they, in principle, want to give you a lot, you know, in King Crimson's case, they're busy doing other things. They're busy working really hard to make extraordinary music. So there were lots of times where I just got in the way and people got annoyed with me and so on. And then there were other times when people perhaps were quite antagonistic towards me for reasons I didn't necessarily understand. And it made it difficult. Physically, it's actually very hard work when you're entering your late middle age, as I am now, and a lot of the band were much older than me. You know, some of them were in their 70s and so on. You become aware of physically how grueling just the process of touring is. I mean, it looks to everybody like you're just, you know, flying business class around the world or going around in a nice bus and staying in nice hotels and then playing for a couple of hours. But actually the toll of that on a musician in particular is extremely hard. Not to mention the fact that for those guys, they're working physically really hard for at least, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours a night. So I found that side of it difficult. I've forgotten the second question.
What did you learn? What did you learn from them?
Well, I learned that it's like rock and roll is hard work when you're in your you know, you're older, you're late middle age. I learned a more sophisticated version of something I already knew, which is that in order to make something great, you have to make great sacrifices, or you have to be prepared to make great sacrifices. I learned something that I realized last night, actually, as I was coming out of the cinema, that you know, I don't think this is always the case, but I think if you're an artist who makes work with an audience in mind, as you have to, I think, if you make cinema, then you really need a great audience. You know, I was saying to my friend last night that I like to make stupid jokes all the time, and in their company, I make my best stupid jokes. You know, they're the best audience for me. And so, you know, I just learned a further, my understanding of the need, an artist's need for a good audience was strengthened by working with King Crimson. And, you know, I mean, that's probably best summed up in, you know, in their attitude to mobile phones. It's not so much about like, I don't want people to be on the phone in my show. It's like, I don't want somebody to flash something which is going to take me out of the moment. It's going to distract other people and stuff. It's like, mobile phones are really annoying in lots of ways. So I went to see this band Stick in the Wheel last week, and somebody was just checking their messages on their phone, but it was in a dark space. So incredibly distracting and so on. So I learned more about the relationship between artist and audience. I learned more about the importance of an audience. And I learned a lot about the need, you know, as the film describes, to be present in the moment and to avoid distraction. If you're there for one thing, that's the thing you should be there for, and try not to. That's the lovely thing about showing documentaries in cinemas, is that you have the sense that you've got an audience's attention, and you need to be respectful of that. And that's a really good way to make a good film, I think, is to sort of be respectful of your audience. But to, you know, to have that sense of a shared moment together is really important, I think.
I felt a lot of regret when I watched the film that I've never seen King Crimson live. No, not about not in general, not regrets, talking about my whole life. No, just, I haven't watched the band.
Why has it come to this, sitting through this ghastly piece of work?
No, I'm good, thanks. No, I mean, I wish I would have seen the band, because I feel like it's such a, it seems like a combination of an very drug-fueled and religious experience that people seem to have when they see them perform. Can you tell me about your first experience when you saw them live?
Did you say drug-fueled?
It looks like it. They look like they're very high, the people in the audience.
There's no, I mean, you know, it's a very non-druggy experience, but it's transcendent.
Yes.
You know, it is. I mean, I think that we're at a very interesting point in society that we may actually have the first sort of near tangible divine being coming into existence thanks to artificial intelligence. But I think simultaneously we're seeing the breakdown of the significance of traditional religion in society. But as a consequence, I think we are seeing, certainly in the UK, there's a sort of pagan resurgence, and I think that is to do with people still needing a religious experience in their lives, even if they don't have a church to go to. So there is a strong element of that in King Crimson. There's an element of trying to bring people to another space. And you're right, that is best experienced live, I think, you know.
But I remember when we talked, when you were here in Munich, and you mentioned on stage, which caught me off guard, that you're not a King Crimson fan at all. And how did you experience it when you heard them live for the first time? Or were you shooting and you were not really in the moment?
I see them live. I went with my dad because Robert had invited everybody in the town. Well, not everyone in the town, but lots of. So we went on a bus to go and see them play in Aylesbury.
How old were you then?
Like 52, 51.
Okay.
Yes. I think, yeah, around then. And I was like, I'm not experienced anything like this before. I was also, you know, we're going to a rock show with your dad. His dad would have been like 80 at this point, you know. So I found it quite challenging, actually, but in a really good way. described the King Crimson live experience as a bit like having one of those deep tissue massages where you're like, you know, it's doing you good,
but it hurts.
And it hurts, and it's reaching the parts of your body that have not received any attention for quite some time, you know. And so it was extraordinary. But I mean, when I say that I'm not really a King Crimson fan, I always qualify that by saying that like they're the best live bands I've ever seen, and I've never seen another band do what they do live. And it is more akin to a classical musical concert, I think, you know. So I love seeing them live. You know, it's a sort of regret of mine that I had I probably was present at about 10 concerts, but like only 2 of those I actually watched. You know, I was I'm backstage getting in everybody's way. So it's sort of, I'm regretful that I didn't get to see them live more, because I love seeing them live. I thought it was just amazing. But on record, it's not really my cup of tea. But then I like really stupid rock and roll. You know, I like really basic, really basic garage rock and stuff like that, and soul music. And there's loads of soul in King Crimson, but it's not soul music.
Have you told Robert about that? I mean, have you talked to them? Did you have a talk about music before you started shooting, or was it based?
I've not had any casual conversations with Robert since starting to make the film, you know. So, and it's a regret of mine, you know, because I hope that our sort of relationship can go back onto an equal footing. There's nothing wrong there, you know. It's no antipathy or animosity or anything, but it's just like our relationship changed once I started working in that space. So I've not really had, and Robert Fripp's not somebody you have casual conversations with, my kind of experience. That's much more to do with like how I'm being in that moment than he is. I think that like I've long said, because I've sort of worked around them for so long, that the reason that famous people go crazy, and I'm not saying that Robert's crazy, but I think the reason that famous people can go crazy is that you can't possibly walk around having a concept of how somebody else is perceiving you on the basis of what they might have seen or read or elsewhere. You can't have that in your head and have a normal conversation with somebody. And you can't be possibly expected to be mediate that, like this, you know, this set of expectations that somebody has of you. There's nothing to do with how you've behaved towards them. It's just how they've come to know you and expect things of you as a result of your, your public persona or whatever. So I think that is to say that, like, I'm probably bringing a lot more to that relationship. Makes it difficult to have a casual conversation than he is. So, and the temptation was to make the film for Robert, but sort of during the process, I was like, no, this is for an audience, you know, a broader audience, and an audience that, like, you know, is perhaps not quite so personally attached to the subject matter as the subject is. You know?
I find it, I mean, being a film and a music journalist myself, I find it difficult to deal with famous people, just what you've mentioned now. I find it difficult because I have expectations and I want to be liked by them. If it's somebody I fancy or have been fancying for many years, I'm so desperate to be cool and to say the right thing and to be the one special interviewer they will never forget. And I fail. I always fail.
I was going to say, I can barely remember our interaction, Christina, our first interview. So
I'm sorry.
You know, no, I'm kidding.
That's why I'm calling you back, just to It's me.
Look vaguely familiar to me.
I had different hair, to be honest. I mean, it was... Anyway.
Whoever lit you has done a very good job. The backlighting on the hair and stuff is very nice. It's like... The lighting I've done here is really
Well,
appalling.
thanks. Yeah, I'm in a very posh place. But back to my question, because I find it very difficult and to imagine like shooting for years with a person that I probably want to appeal to, and I want them to like me. And if they're very smart, I want them to think that I am smart. So how did you deal with that? And I mean, you just mentioned that your relationship with Robert is still kind of different from other relationships, but how did you deal with that while shooting, while editing, to have this person in mind, and how did you, or could you liberate yourself from that, from your own expectations?
Well, I think it might be pompous or pretentious or both, and lots of other things, to say that like, I think if you've got a commitment to the truth, a real commitment to the truth, then that makes a lot of those things simple, you know. And in my experience, I was thinking about this last night as well, that so much of my life has been, for selfish reasons, devoted to music and the love of music. That whilst I find the majority of them extraordinarily frustrating and feckless and unreliable, with a profound lack of personal responsibility, the one thing I have in common with musicians is a love of music. You know, and so there is a common language there that allows me to talk to them without being intimidated necessarily. And crucially, that, and particularly, this is a particularly male thing as well, is that all too often conversations about music between men especially can be like, have you heard that record? Oh, you haven't heard that record? Well, I've heard that record and I've got it on vinyl, and all that kind of utter bullshit. But if your conversation about music is truly open, and your response to that, if you haven't heard that record, is like, no, I haven't. Tell me about it, and I'd like to know more about it, and why does it matter, and what's good about it, and so on. Then you just have this very open dialogue in a language that everybody can understand. And conversely, like when I worked at MTV and, you know, interviewing musicians for a living, and musicians and filmmakers generally, you could pretty quickly tell the ones who were like insincere and inauthentic, you know. And again, not in that like, oh, I've heard that, you haven't heard, so weird, but you could tell like the people who are in it for themselves, not for the music. And with regard to Crimson, everybody's there for the music. You know, they're not there to be famous. And, you know, whilst, you know, with the most of the attention is on in Robert and that thing, and as Bill Bruford said in an earlier cut of the movie, if you turn the spotlight off you will of course be drawing attention to yourself, and that is, I think, is a valid evaluation of some of the dynamics related to Robert. But so yeah, if you're absolutely right that like, and I don't think the film would have been well served if I used the film to try and become friends with, you know, musicians. There are people I've become friendly with because of it, but that's not the intention. It's, you know, you go in there wanting to find the truth of things, but also, in my experience making documentaries, I do find the truth better by developing a relationship with somebody, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a friendship, but it does have to be based on trust and respect and mutual understanding, I think. And I think that in order to achieve that, you have to be prepared to give of yourself at least as much as you're asking somebody to give themselves, you know, which in my case means just droning on about myself for hours and hours and hours, which, you know, something you're well used to by now.
Yeah. I have one last question, and that is about the scene at the end of the film, when Robert tells you you just missed the most important meeting in the history of the band.
Spoiler.
Huh? Sorry?
Spoiler alert.
Sorry?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, yes. So, do you know what they talked about?
It was a joke.
It was a joke. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I had people here in the audience, they asked me and they said, "Can you ask Toby what did they say?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess it's probably not that important, the meeting." Okay, so it was a joke. Thanks.
That's a very literal,
Okay.
possibly German take on the end of the film. There.
Yes.
In England, there is just like a constant, like you have to. I mean, you know, famously, there is a comedic relationship between Germans and English people, but I think generally speaking in England there is, and Robert's comment there is a very good example of that, is that there is always a sort of underlayer of irony in operation, you know, which we can call upon at any point to get ourselves out of trouble.
So you confused your German audience, but you made your German audience very, very happy with the film, Toby. It's been a pleasure to meet you again via Zoom, and hopefully we'll meet again soon in real life.
It's like the last film took me 7 years, this one's taken me 5, so maybe I'll see you in about 3.5 years, Christina, with luck.
And I still won't be 40, so that's good.
Good.
So, thank you so much. Toby Amies, das ist der Regisseur von In the Court of the Crimson King, ein Film, für den Sie abstimmen können für unseren Kino-Publikumspreis, der ja gestiftet wird von BR und von Dreisat. Bitte stimmen Sie ab. And now it's time to say goodbye, Toby.
Tschüss.
Tschüss. Have a good one.